Gamera, Gamera, Suyo iso Gamera, Suyo iso Gamera, Suyo iso Gamera. That's right, guys. Welcome back to Super Kaiju Binge, episode 24. I can't believe it's been 6 freaking months since the last episode of Super Kaiju Binge. What the hell kind of rabbit holes did I fall down? So yes, indeed, I am bringing back Super Kaiju Binge, and joined by Lord Hellhound from the HorrorMetal channel.
Yo.
He and I will be tackling the original Gamera series, starting, of course, with the one that started it all, Gamera the Giant Monster from 1965. What a generic title.
Indeed.
So, what might your history with Gamera be, Hellhound?
So, yeah, growing up, of course, I was a huge Godzilla fan and just giant monsters in general, especially Japanese ones. And, yeah, I was never a big Gamera fan growing up. In fact, I didn't know a lot of people who knew about Godzilla, but every time, somebody did bring it up, people would ask me, oh, you're a Gamera fan, too? To the point of, where it almost kind of annoyed me, and I'd be like, no, I'm not. Then I finally did have my first exposure to Gamera through Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Of course.
The first time I saw, that was the first time I saw most of them. That was pretty much one of the only ways they were really even available back then. And then, so I eventually saw more of them over the years, which was had to have been the Americanized English dubs, which sucked. So yeah, the first time I saw the first movie, it was unfortunately the Americanized version under the title Gamera the Invincible with the 2 M's, which is, of course, the inferior version of the movie, at least in my opinion, anyway. So I'm still not nearly as big of a Gamera fan as I am Godzilla, but it did grow on me over the years. Like with Godzilla, how I was instantly a fan. Having said that, I don't think Gamera, the character itself, or even the franchise for that matter, as a package, would really crack my top 10 giant monsters, but I still consider myself a fan, even though I do consider a few of the movies hit or miss. But
to say the least.
What's that?
To say the least. Oh boy.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
So, with Gamera, I know that Gamera was created to be pretty much like what William Castle is to Alfred Hitchcock. Try as they might, they just never really could compete with the thing that they were created to rival. Because it is true, William Castle was always trying to rival Hitchcock throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but William Castle embraced just horror and chiller and suspense films to be more fun, whereas Alfred Hitchcock was mainstream and actually could make thrilling, chilling, and scary movies, in theory.
Indeed.
And yeah, I tend to agree. Gamera has always come off as being like a poor man's Godzilla. The Gamera franchise is weird, man, because there's times when the Gamera franchise... Let me get this out there. There are a couple of Gamera movies that I really do like, but even those, I don't think... They come kind of close, but they don't even scratch the surface of my favorite Godzilla movies. Like Godzilla can be a perfect 100, and Gamera, even trying his hardest, can at best make maybe an 80. I've never been a super gigantic Gamera fan. There was a time when I really, really, really wanted to see some Gamera movies. It was specifically the Heisei trilogy, but I'll get more into that when I get to reviewing the Heisei trilogy. Oh boy, those movies. But yeah, growing up, I never was the biggest Gamera fan. Gamera always intrigued me, but I never really saw a full Gamera movie until I was about 15 or 16. I would see clips of Gamera movies on YouTube growing up. And Gamera always intrigued me, but I just never could get my hands on any Gamera films. It didn't help that for so fucking long, the only way that you could get your hands on a majority of the Gamera franchise, especially with the Showa series, were those really cheap, shitty public domain bargain bin DVDs that have like 50 movies in one set, and they'll have the shitty, grainy pan and scan public domain versions of a lot of the Showa Gamera movies. Ugh.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was the only way I was able to watch them for years, and that was the only way I owned them. And yeah, they looked terrible. They looked like they were all recorded with a potato.
Pretty much. It really wasn't until the there were the Shout Factory DVDs, but I never got my hands on any of those. And those have long since gone out of print. For a while, all that I had was the Gamera Legacy Collection, which, Hellhound, I'm pretty sure that's what you have, right?
Yeah, the Mill Creek Entertainment one with the first 11 movies.
Yeah, I had that, and I got it for $18 when it first came out. So I'm like, 11 movies for $18? Give. So I was pretty happy with that for a while. And then now, of course, I have the 2 Blu-ray sets of the first 8 Gamera movies. I don't have the Arrow collections. I want to get my hands on the 2 more simplified versions, because now the big giant Arrow set of the Gamera movies is expensive as hell. Holy shit. And I have the Heisei trilogy on Blu-ray and Gamera the Brave on DVD. We'll talk about that when we get to Gamera the Brave. Oh boy. But yeah, still growing up, wasn't a big Gamera fan. Not until I got a lot older, and even as an adult, Gamera still doesn't quite live up to Godzilla. And to finish up what I was saying, the Gamera franchise is strange. It has moments where it does show itself to be some of the best monster movies ever made. But damn, does it have some low-ass lows in its franchise. To the point where I would say the lowest Gamera movies are the worst monster movies ever made. And I know a lot of people are gonna think they know what I'm talking about, but just wait until I get later in the Gamera franchise, because I'm gonna have some opinions that are actually gonna be pretty surprising. But with all that being said, anything else to add before we get into the plot?
I said that covers it. Yeah, like you said, I was never a huge fan either, and I definitely don't think it lives up to Godzilla. And just pretty much just a big ripoff, at least at the beginning.
And oh my god, yes, the original Gamera movie is definitely a Godzilla ripoff. It was created solely to be a rival to the Godzilla franchise. The original Gamera movie is not one of the biggest Godzilla ripoffs, because I actually have seen Aegon the Atomic Dragon, and that movie is literally a shot-for-shot copy of Godzilla. But yes, Gamera very much so is a pretty big Godzilla ripoff. And I would say it's one of the more notable Godzilla ripoffs, mostly just because, yeah, Gamera actually managed to become a franchise. Guillermo del Toro once put the original Gamera in his top 5 favorite kaiju film list. Damn, really?
Wow. How about that?
That actually reminds me of myself. Once upon a time, speaking of the original Gamera film, I actually did consider this movie to be one of my favorite monster movies. Not so much now. I do still like this movie. I think it's a very entertaining monster movie for what it is. But as we will discuss when we get to our pros and cons, it has cons aplenty. But with all that being said, let us jump into the plot of the original Gamera, shall we? It's actually pretty simple and straightforward. In the Arctic, an unknown aircraft, they're totally Russians. That's what they say in the American version. But these unknown aircrafts, they're totally Russians. Is shot down by an American jet fighter being led by some of the absolute worst American actors I've ever seen in a kaiju movie. God! Calling all fighter planes! Answer! Calling all fighter planes! Answer! Ugh.
Damn. This is fairly common in Japanese monster movies at that time, is whenever they had American actors.
It makes me want to have to pull out the word from our sponsor. And yes, I am toting the brand new Coke Zero design, which tastes exactly the same.
Nice.
But I like the red and black color.
I dig that too.
The aircraft crashes and its cargo, an atomic bomb, explodes. So, which now makes the Eskimo tribe nearby have to live in an irradiated wasteland. Great. The explosion awakens a giant prehistoric tusked turtle, of course, being Gamera. Japanese scientists on an expedition nearby, Dr. Hidaka, his assistant Kyoko, and reporter Aoyagi are given a stone tablet by an Eskimo chief who explains that the creature is called Gamera, of course. Gamera destroys the expedition ship and escapes the Arctic specifically. Sightings of flying saucers soon surface in Japan, and then in Sagami Bay, Toshio, a boy being forced to release his pet turtle by his asshole father, and his family encounter Gamera, who attacks their lighthouse in a scene that is totally ripping off the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Yeah.
However, Gamera saves Toshio from falling to his death.
Yeah.
Toshio becomes attached to Gamera after finding his pet turtle gone, believing it to be turned into Gamera. Ugh.
Hey.
Why? Why? Upon returning to Japan, Dr. Hidaka, Kyoko, and Aoyagi, God, this dude's name is terrible, accompany the military when Gamera approaches a thermonuclear or a geothermal power plant. Despite attempts to prevent its approach, including ripping off the original Godzilla by using high-tension wires, jeez. Gamera proceeds to attack the power plant and devours the flames all around it. Dr. Hidaka consults with another doctor named Dr. Marasi, and the military recommends using experimental freezing bombs. That's convenient. The bombs postpone Gamera's assault as the military rig the area with explosives and succeed in turning the monster onto its back, utilizing the aspect that he is indeed a giant turtle very well. But then Gamera pulls in his limbs, expels flames, and takes flight, spinning around like a flying saucer. And as Roger Ebert put it once, Gamera is powered by farts. Toshio and his sister Nobuyo visit Dr. Hidaka while staying in Tokyo with their uncle. Toshio explains to Dr. Hidaka that Gamera is lonely and not evil. Fuck this kid. Dr. Hidaka, meanwhile, has observed that Gamera consumes fossil fuels and may seek atomic bombs for their energy. Meanwhile, disasters and accidents start to occur. Koto Ward is struck by flash floods and ships collide in Tokyo Bay. Dr. Hidaka claims that may be Gamera the cause due to hiding in the bay. An international scientific conference is called upon and decide to use the Z plan based at Oshima Island. Gamera lands at Haneda Airport and proceeds to wreak havoc in Tokyo. Toshio and his family evacuate, but Toshio runs away like a fucking little selfish shithead. The military keep Gamera at bay at an oil refinery by feeding it petroleum via trains, while the Z plan continues up preparations. As Nobuyo searches for her brother, Toshio makes attempts to breach restricted areas to see Gamera until he is caught at Oshima Island and not subsequently thrown into a volcano, much to our dismay. Dr. Marasi later informs Nobuyo of Toshio's safety. The Z plan is eventually completed, and Gamera is lured to Oshima by lighting an oil slick path. However, a typhoon blows the fire out, and Aoyagi starts a bonfire to lure back Gamera, but it is also extinguished by the typhoon. A nearby volcano erupts, which does successfully lure Gamera back to the island. The next day, the Z plan is put into action. Gamera is lured into the nose cone of a giant rocket, which has to be 1,000 feet tall, and launched to Mars. The world celebrates, and Toshio tells Dr. Hidaka he will become a scientist so that he can visit Gamera. As long as it takes him far away from us, he bids the monster farewell, and the movie comes to an end. So how about this plot, Hellhound?
Man, yeah. Some of that sounded even worse than it actually is, yeah. Oh, man.
Well, this plot, it's kind of a mixed bag, honestly, because while it is a fun monster movie, it's there's elements of it that are very original and very inventive and imaginative. There's other elements that are extremely typical. Not boring or bland per se, just extremely typical. This movie, of course, came out in 1965. A whole slew of monster movies had come out at that point. You had the original Godzilla, you had Godzilla Raids Again, you had Gorgo, you had Konga, you had, let's see, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms beforehand. You had a whole plethora of monster movies that were made at the time. And there's many elements of this movie's plot that just make it feel very typical of a giant monster movie at the time. But I still do say that there are elements of this plot that make it stand on its own. Gamera certainly is a very distinctive monster. I do think this movie is more well-made than a lot of monster movies that were being made at the time. Despite this movie's low budget and very strict shooting schedule, little bit of production knowledge and trivia. See, originally, Dai, the studio that made Gamera, of course, was not planning on making a Godzilla ripoff. What they wanted to do, this was inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds and, of course, Godzilla movies. Masaichi Nagata, who is a studio head at Dai, wanted to make a similar film. In 1964, Dai attempted to produce a film called Nezera, the giant horde beast Nezera, or Nezera the rat monster. With this film's director, Noriaki Yuasa, directing, of course. However, the project was shut down by the health department because some retarded-ass studio executives decided they wanted to use, instead of domesticated rats for the film, they wanted to use real-life sewer rats from Tokyo. Why? I mean, have you not seen undomesticated rats? They're nasty. They have freaking what's it called? Mange. They have fleas. They have ticks. They're sometimes rabid. They eat babies, for Christ's sake. Rabid rats are disgusting creatures. And of course, they breed and breed. Did I mention breed? No bullshit. The breeding, the fleas and ticks got so bad with these disgusting rats. The set that they were using for Nezra literally had to be burned to the ground.
Damn.
So after that, Nagata then conceived Gamera to replace Nezra. And this movie had a very low budget and a pretty tight schedule. And Noriaki Yuasa was forced to use outdated equipment, faulty props, and also tons of belittlement from colleagues. But Yuasa was determined to complete Gamera with Daii's resources. And despite that, there were brief talks of hiring Tsuburaya Productions to finish the film. But the film was released, and surprisingly, Gamera, the original movie, was a smash hit at the box office, having a budget of only 40 million yen, which I presume that is a low budget, especially since at this time all Japanese kaiju films were made in color. And I'm pretty sure the original Gamera might have been the last kaiju film to be made in black and white. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it was the last, or at least one of the very last. Kind of like how the original Suspiria was one of the last, if not the last films to use 3-strip Technicolor.
Right.
So I like the film's plot. It's very derivative of the original Gojira, and we'll get to that in a minute. It's very typical for kaiju films at the time, but it's still fun, entertaining, well-made, and well-told, in my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, it is pretty derivative and basic. And as far as Gamera's design goes, it sounds like it might be kind of ridiculous on paper. Giant turtle with tusks and shoots fire out of his arm and leg holes and spins around like a top. But it's actually pretty cool in the movie. It actually works. I've seen way more ridiculous looking kaiju. So.
Oh yeah, delve into the Ultraman franchise. That's untapped potential for ridiculous monsters there.
Yeah, definitely. And it is definitely very clearly a Godzilla rip-off. Sorry, but like you said, there are some interesting additions to it. I kind of like Gamera's origin. I really like the way they defeat him at the end, even though it is pretty convenient that they just happen to have a rocket that could.
Like this giant 1,000-foot tall rocket. What the hell were they going to use this for?
I know. That was oddly specific.
We'll get to that later, but
yeah. But yeah, I do like the fact that that was an interesting, kind of a unique way to defeat kaiju. Usually at the end they're just like destroyed somehow. But I kind of like that. Just like, I'll send them to Mars. It'll be somebody else's problem.
Just get rid of them.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, there's a few other clever things that are kind of unique. I really do love the scene where he first does shoot the fire out of his arm, legs, holes. As silly as it is, it's kind of a cool scene. How they're like, "Oh, he's hiding." They're kind of laughing and stuff, saying, "We're winning." He's hiding, and then he just does that. What the hell? They're all just like completely bewildered. I love that part. That's one of the highlights of the movie. But yeah, like you said, it is a fun movie, and there's far worse. Even as Godzilla ripoffs go, it's not best kaiju movies, but it's far from the worst.
Word has been spoken. No, that as a Godzilla ripoff, we'll get to the comparison. I do want to get the comparisons out of the way, but I will say I'll agree with Bill Wurster from Zazubar. as a Godzilla ripoff, the original Gamera really isn't that bad. It does suffer from that, and there's many instances where it's plain as day that this movie is ripping off Godzilla, but it's not like Aegon the Atomic Dragon or Yongari Monster from the Deep, where those are just straight up ripoffs, which is weird too, because Yongari Monster from the Deep also at times feels like a Gamera ripoff. A ripoff of a ripoff.
Yeah, it totally does.
So let's get the Gamera and Godzilla comparisons out of the way. I'm not going to go too in depth, because there's almost an unlimited amount of, not literally, but there's so many comparisons between Gamera and Godzilla. But let's just get the really big ones out of the way. Both kaiju started out their careers in black and white. Both kaiju started out their careers as villains, though Gamera wasn't a villain for nearly as long, and nor was he a villain nearly as often. They're both products of their time in terms of having nuclear weapons and the Cold War. Not so much the Cold War, that's for Gamera specifically, but eventually the Cold War was an influence on Godzilla movies. They're both giant, fire-breathing reptilian monsters that attack cities, presumably to feed on flames. Gamera's attack on Tokyo looks and sounds very similar to Godzilla's raid on Tokyo, although it's not nearly as long and it's not nearly as dark. And in both movies, of course, there's multiple attacks on multiple cities, and the military convey multiple different type of super weapons to destroy both kaiju. And at the end of each movie, the military convene together to create a super weapon to defeat the title monster. Although you can actually give Gamera some props in his original movie, because he's so tough, the military aren't even able to kill him. They just get rid of him. Whereas in the original Gojira, they actually are able to kill the monster. So you can give Gamera some props for that one.
Yeah.
And of course, as the franchise went along, in their second film of each franchise, the title kaiju did fight another kaiju. Although with there's one little difference. Gamera's second movie was in color, whereas Godzilla's third film was in color. And also in their second films, the monster that they fight is a quadruped lizard type kaiju. Oh, gorilla rules. As long as it is not gorilla versus monster, that's a terrible movie. Fuck you, Asylum. Yeah, there's tons and tons. Oh, one more. Eventually, there was a flying bat pterodactyl type kaiju that was introduced into Godzilla and Gamera. Although in Gamera's case, it went on to be his arch rival. And both monsters do have another monster that's considered to be their arch enemy. Although with Godzilla, for me, it's debatable because he's got 2 or 3 monsters that could be considered his arch rival. And with Gamera, spoilers, it's Gauss, but there's never been any specific reason given. Like in the Godzilla series, there's a focused rivalry between Godzilla and King Ghidorah, whereas Gauss is only given that title just by default because he's the only monster to be in multiple Gamera movies. There's never an established rivalry between Gamera and Gauss. But whatever, they still have their both monsters still do have their arch rivals. God, I can't talk. Blah. So, with all those Godzilla and Gamera comparisons out of the way, again, there's many more, but we're already a half hour into this review, so let's actually start talking about the movie. So,
All right.
You want to go for your pros first?
Sure.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 8 pros.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I didn't write mine down. I'm just gonna wing it.
Go ahead.
So I already mentioned. I do like how there are, despite how derivative it is, there are a few creative moments. Like you already said, the way they defeat the monster at the end, they didn't just utterly destroy him. They just kind of found a way to get rid of him, which obviously led to a sequel and then ensuing franchise. And then again, I do like the beginning where he comes out of the ice. I think that's kind of a I know that's been done after, probably before. If I spend more time, I could probably think of several examples. But I don't know. I do kind of dig that. And I will say this one kaiju film. I feel like as far as Japanese giant monsters movies go, and even sci-fi films in the 50s and 60s in general, a lot of times they do have kind of a boring cast. The characters just aren't memorable, and I find myself wanting to skip the scenes. Now, there are a lot of boring characters, but I'm saying it's not the worst when it comes to that sort of thing. It's far from the best too, but I don't think the scenes with the humans are absolutely unbearable, except for, of course, the certain character, which we'll get to. When
We'll get to him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. More of that later.
Yes.
And like I said, the design of Gamera is pretty cool. Maybe kind of hokey sounding when it comes down to it, but I think it is creative. Despite being heavily inspired by Godzilla. I mean, the character itself doesn't look all that similar to Godzilla, other than, of course, the fact that they're a giant green, reptile or amphibian type creature, or whatever
that breathe fire.
Yeah, right, exactly. And yeah, that is kind of a creative ability too. Like I said, despite being still not really entirely sure how that works, because if you protect your arms and legs, like where does the fire come from? And then
his ass.
Well, yeah, yeah, you already explained that. True, but I don't know how it comes out of the arm and leg holes, but
who knows?
I'm sure there's some kind of well thought out scientific theory that somebody out there has come up with. So, and I'll eat my words.
And yeah, the Heisei series doesn't really explain it, but it gives a very plausible. Well, it does explain it, but it doesn't go into the technical aspects. That just says Gamera was bioengineered. But in the Showa series, that's not really there, or that's not really prevalent.
Right, yeah, they don't really touch upon that much, but
his ass.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I should have wrote these down. I probably could think of more pros, but
well, let me go through some of mine, maybe to refresh your memory.
Yeah, okay.
Pro number 1 is I actually like the black and white look of this movie. Even though it's symbolic of the fact that, yeah, this movie had a low budget. However, like I've said before, I think it was a bit of a happy accident that this movie is in black and white, because it's obvious that Gamera is trying to emulate and imitate Godzilla. And I think one thing that helps if you're trying to really compare Gamera to Godzilla, if you start out with both franchises being in black and white, it still gives Gamera that not really creepy, but a bit more of a foreboding and tense atmosphere that the original Godzilla had, to a much lesser extent, but still, I do like the black and white look of this movie. It does give it a bit of a darker feel and a darker tone. Certainly of the Showa series, that's for damn sure. Though I think the darkest movie is the next movie in the Showa series, but this one's probably close second. This will lead me into pro number 2, the Cold War atmosphere of this movie. Yeah, this movie does have, well, It's not quite as obvious, nor was it, I don't think, intentionally done this way. Um, but like I said, since this movie is emulating Godzilla, the original Godzilla, of course, had a very heavy anti-nuclear energy allegory and social commentary. And this movie doesn't necessarily have an anti-nuclear energy commentary, but it does deal with the Cold War. And of course, nuclear testing is a big part of its plot because that's what awakens the title monster. It does have a very similar feel to Godzilla, but I actually don't mind it as well because, like I said, that does give this movie a bit more of a more tense, timely, yes, but still a tense, heavy, almost creepy atmosphere. Like it's the black and white of the movie and the Cold War talk of this movie that just make it feel a little bit more tense, a little bit more dark, and a little bit more serious, especially compared to the rest of the Showa series. Ugh. More on that later. Pro number 3 is I overall like this movie's production design. All of these sets look fairly well made, a little bit cheap, but still, like the airplane sets and the Oshima Island sets all look really good. Not talking about the effects, but all of the sets for the geothermal power plant and Tokyo itself and Oshima Island, those all look really good. Yes, this movie had a low budget, but I do feel like the special effects artists were actually using limited resources to their advantage. I also think that's a reason why this movie is so short. Unlike a lot of other kaiju movies at the time, which ranged from an hour to 25 to an hour and 35 minutes long, the original Gamera is only an hour and 18, which is a bit of a double-edged sword, but they were funneling their money into making short and sweet moments look good rather than stretch their resources thin like a future Gamera movie does into a longer film. So it's a double-edged sword. But yeah, the production design overall for this film I think is really, really good. Pro number 4 is the ending. I think actually the ending of closing off Gamera into the nose of a giant rocket and shooting him off into space. Convenient. Confusing. And it's kind of a what the fuck moment. But, like I said, it's actually kind of giving some credit to Gamera because he's so tough, the Japanese military is unable to kill him. They try, well, they tried maybe 2 or 3 times to kill him. Well, they didn't really kill him. They shoot at him a few times, sure. They use the freezing bombs and they knock him on his back. But that's about it. But still, the military puts up a fight against Gamera, and he proves to be so strong, and they're just like, you know what? Fuck it. Just cage him up, shoot him off into space. Get rid of him. Okay, that's original. So it's kind of funny, too. Let's see. Pro number 5 is Dr. Hidaka, played by Eiji Funakoshi. Now, there's one aspect of him that is very obvious, and I'll just get into it right now. Dr. Hidaka is very obviously a big, giant ripoff of Dr. Yamane from the original Gojira. It's plain as day. They're both scientists. They both have mustaches. They both have slick back salt and pepper hair. And they're both very solemn and serious characters. But here's something original. I actually like Dr. Hidaka more than Dr. Yamane, simply for the sole reason that, unlike Dr. Yamane, who pouts in his room when he doesn't get his opportunity to study Godzilla. Dr. Hidaka is in awe of the scientific wonder of Gamera, but he himself is also aware that Gamera is a big threat and a big problem, and he's actually proactive and helpful in figuring out how to defeat Gamera. Unlike Dr. Yamane, especially in the original script of the original Gojira, Dr. Yamane was portrayed as damn near like a mad scientist and would try to sabotage attempts to kill Godzilla. There is a character that is like that in this movie, but again, more on him later.
Yes, indeed.
But no, I actually do like Dr. Hidaka more than Yamane. He actually is aware that Gamera is a big giant problem and he needs to be dealt with. He's dripping with humanity. He's dripping with scientific curiosity and wonder, sure, but he's intelligent and he's proactive in the situation. So I actually really like Dr. Hidaka for those reasons. Despite the fact that he is a big, giant Dr. Yamane ripoff. But whatever.
Indeed.
Pro number 6 is Gamera himself. Gamera in this probably goes without saying. He's the highlight of the film. Gamera is awesome in this movie. I love his design. I love his suit. I love the movie whenever he is on screen. If you do want to watch this movie for Gamera, you will not be disappointed because Gamera is one badass, awesome monster in this movie. He is a total brick shithouse and tear asses his way through every city and landscape that he's in. Nothing stops him. Nothing gets in his way, and he wrecks the shit of everything in sight. I love his roar. I love his design. I love his powers. I just love Gamera in this movie. He is such a badass monster and a sight to behold and a feast to the eyes.
Most definitely.
This leads into the next pro being the monster action. There's really just there's just Gamera running around and destroying shit, but it's really entertaining and it's very well done. I may as well talk about the final pro is the special effects. The special effects for this movie were done by Yone Sabor. Hang on a minute. I need to pronounce this guy's name. Yone Saburo Tsukiji, who was a Japanese special effects director who worked on 11 films in a career spanning 21 years. He co-designed Gamera with Masao Yagi, Noriaki Yuasa, and Akira Inoue. He worked on Warning from Space, which is a movie I want to see. That was Dai's first tokusatsu film. Panther's Eye, Nichiren and the Great Mongol Invasion. Nezera, The Great Wall. Gamera the Giant Monster. And oh my god, Gamera Super Monster was his last movie. Dude, what a fucking shitty ass movie to finish your career on.
Yeah, indeed.
What is wrong with you?
That's tragic.
Anyway, so yeah, the special effects were done by this guy. And they're pretty. I don't know if he was an underling of Tsuburaya. He may very well have been, but the special effects are pretty damn good for a movie of this time and budget. The miniature sets are very well made and well built. They look great when they're destroyed. All the fire effects in this movie are really, really good. This has been said a lot, but whenever Gamera is surrounded by fire, he looks fantastic. The flamethrower effects with Gamera are really, really solid. There's one or two shots where you can clearly see inside Gamera's mouth. There's just like a flamethrower inside there that's shooting the fire. But still, it looks really good. And when Gamera breathes fire, it looks fantastic. Gamera spinning around and flying looks really, really good, even though you can tell it's clearly on wires. Well, you can't tell, but you just know that's how it was done. Haneda Airport looks fantastic. Tokyo is probably the second best set in this movie. I do agree with a lot of people. The geothermal power plant is probably the best set made in this movie. It just looks really, really well made and really, really convincing. I don't really think there's any flubs in the effects, at least to my knowledge. There may be some blue screen work that here and there that's a little shoddy, but since the movie's in black and white, it kind of hides the fact that there's shoddy blue screen effects. Overall, the not much to say, but the special effects overall are very, very, very good, especially for a movie of this low budget for 1965. A for effort, thumbs up.
I agree.
Anything else to add?
For pros?
Yeah.
I think you pretty much covered it. Yeah, I do agree. The special effects do look very, very good for the time. And I like the look of the film, too. I do think the black and white kind of adds to the atmosphere and the visuals and the overall like feel and stuff. The mood.
All right. With all these good things to say about the original Gamera, oh boy, do we have quite a few bad things to talk about. Once again, I have 8 cons. Do you want to go first?
Sure.
All right, go ahead. Save the elephant in the room for last. Hopefully you know what I'm referring to.
Okay, yeah. I was okay, yeah. I was planning on that anyway. So yeah, aside from it being a Godzilla ripoff, we already covered that pretty much. And yeah, like you said, it doesn't really ruin the movie, though it does detract from it a little bit.
Yeah, we may as well talk about that together because that's one of my cons. Yes, this movie is very derivative of the original Gojira. As we stated, this is a Godzilla ripoff. It was made to be a Godzilla ripoff and to be a rival to Toho. This was Dai having their attempt to get the piece of that kaiju pie. It does succeed, but at the cost of making this movie a little more distinctive. It is distinctive, but there's many moments where you can literally just pick and pull out elements of the movie that are just like, this is from Godzilla, and that's from Godzilla, and this is all from Godzilla.
Yeah, basically.
Keep going.
Yeah. Have you seen the original Japanese Gojira? And you watch this one, you'll definitely notice quite a bit of similarities. And they don't even really try to make it subtle. Like it can be more obvious. But yeah, like you said, it's not one of the worst Godzilla ripoffs. And as far as Godzilla ripoffs go, this probably is one of the better ones.
I'd probably say it's the best.
Yeah, you're probably right. Actually, yeah, I'll agree. And yeah, like you already said, the American actors are pretty bad. I think they did kind of drag the movie down a little bit. And I know we're specifically reviewing the Japanese version only, but I feel like I should at least mention that this, not really a con, because it has nothing to do with the original Japanese version. I feel like I should at least mention that this has one of my least favorite Americanized English dubs.
Me too.
Japanese monster movie ever. Man, do I hate the shoehorned in American scenes.
Gamera, technically, this movie has 3 versions. Technically, there's the original Japanese cut. There's the Sandy Frank version, which was released for kids in the 1980s, which was just pretty much a straightforward dub of the original Gamera movie, just with a little bit of a different intro. And then there's the infamous Gamera the Invincible version released in 1966, which was basically a Godzilla King of the Monsters treatment to Gamera, which is yet another similarity between Godzilla and Gamera, is that both monsters' first exposure in America was a heavily re-edited Americanized version. They shot new scenes featuring American actors, dubbed over all of the Japanese footage. And they added an extra M to Gamera's name. This is literally the reason, in order to prevent audiences from calling the monster camera, like camera, the thing you take photos with.
Oh wow! I didn't.
So what are they expecting to pronounce Gamera or Gamera? Which I hate that in a lot of Gamera English dubs they call it they call him Gamera, which what it's Gamera. The fuck?
Yeah.
But yeah,
I still hear people pronounce it that way to this day.
Gamera the Invincible, in my opinion, the one thing about, I'm not going to include this as a con for this movie because I ultimately just kind of don't care. But in the Japanese version of Gamera, Gamera is stated to be an ancient turtle monster from the lost continent of Atlantis. Whereas in Gamera the Invincible, he's simplified to be just a giant prehistoric turtle, which I do like that because it's a lot simpler. And also, since they're emulating Godzilla, it's a giant prehistoric turtle that was reawakened by H-bombs. Godzilla is a giant prehistoric dinosaur that was resurrected via H-bombs. Yeah, they're, again, trying to emulate Godzilla. Whereas the Atlantis origin just kind of makes the mythology around Gamera a bit muddled and confusing. But again, I don't really count that as a con because, once again, I just kind of don't care. Not to mention, the Atlantis thing is greatly expounded upon in the Gamera Heisei series, so I'll just leave it at that. But continue.
Yeah, I agree. Like King Kong versus Godzilla, the American version, like they felt the need to this Americanized version, Gamera the Invincible, to have scenes of like news reporters and military personnel people talking about, telling the audience what's happening. It's like, man, did the Americans like really back then really think that like the distributors or whatever really think that Americanizers are that stupid that they couldn't follow what was happening?
I mean, damn.
Unless people were explaining it. It's like, okay, yeah, I know. I'm watching the same movie that you guys are needlessly narrating. I know what's going on. You know, I really don't need to spell it out in spoon-fed. It's not that difficult to follow. You know,
it's like the American cut to Godzilla's Revenge. Another thing too, movies back then never really shut up.
Yeah.
If characters weren't, there's either characters talking, action going on, music playing, or some kind of narration. There was never any quiet moments.
Nope, never. And that one's no exception. And also, it's been a while since I've watched the American cut of Gamera the Gamera the Invincible version. But I don't know if this is one of them, but why did American versions of Japanese giant monster movies always feel the need to have like some kind of stock footage explosion at the beginning and warning the dangers of like nuclear fallout?
Because 50s and 60s monster movies, that's why.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. I guess I answered my own question on that one, but yeah, it's still very annoying. Again, I don't remember if this is one of the ones that does that, but okay, so yeah, I think that's enough of the American cut. It sucks, but yeah, it doesn't really count as a con since we're within the Japanese movie, and that has nothing to do with this one. Yeah, they can't help it. You know, that somebody adapted it very poorly. So where was it? Okay, yeah, the cons. Not really a con, but I do think it's weird how, like, at one point they mentioned you might possibly be vulnerable to ice. It's like, hello, he was frozen for all that time, and it didn't seem to really faze him.
Okay, Brendan Tenold.
What's that?
Okay, Brendan Tenold, you're not the only one to point that out.
Oh yeah, he probably did point that. Yeah,
He pointed it out multiple times because it actually is a strange weakness. Why is Gamera vulnerable to the cold, whereas he was in suspended animation for millions of years and never died? So why would ice hurt him?
Yeah, exactly. It makes no sense. And so I haven't watched Brennan Snowd's review of that in quite some time. But to be fair, pretty much everybody who reviews this movie is probably going to mention that at least once, because it's definitely something I noticed when I rewatched it earlier today. I was just like, what? Okay. And I always thought that too every time I watched it as well. So should we get to
the elephant in the room?
Yeah.
Well, let me get through mine first. Hang on. We talked about, so con number 1 was the many similarities to Godzilla. Con number 2 is the very typical story. Not much to say about this, but again, this movie's story is very typical for a 50s or 60s giant monster movie. Half of it is typical, because one half of it is very distinctive, mostly in Gamera himself, but just the movie around him is just a very typical giant monster movie. Con number 3, this isn't a big one, but I kind of feel like this movie was just a tech demo for this special effects team to show, hey, look at this movie. Look at this giant monster movie. Gamera, look at these effects. Look at this monster. Look what he can do. Not a big con, but still, watching this movie recently, I did get the feel like this was more just a tech demo than a legitimate passion project film. Next con, I already talked about this a little bit too, is I do think this movie is a little bit too short. I feel like there just could have been more monster action. Not to say that there's too little monster action, but I still would have preferred if there was a bit more monster action. Well, no. Gamera's attack on Tokyo does feel a little too short. It looks great, and it's a great scene. It's fun and entertaining, but I still feel like it's just a little too short. Especially with this movie trying to emulate Godzilla. It feels like Godzilla's greatest hits, but with a giant turtle instead of a giant dinosaur.
Pretty much.
The next con is this movie has a very generic music score. It's very standard, very generic, very typical, and almost bland giant monster movie music. Granted, it is at least giant monster movie music, but still, it doesn't stick out of the crowd of, like, even the Gamera franchise itself later on would have iconic music, but the music in this movie is very generic and very standard. Not a huge problem, but still one nonetheless. The next con is this movie's pacing is broken. Just broken. The first 20 minutes or so flies by like a million miles an hour. And then the movie just jumps back and forth from being slow to quick, slow to quick, slow to quick, until the last 25 minutes or so, when then the movie moves at a pretty nice flow until it's over. That's because the human story and the monster story are coalescing. It's not like Sinister 2 syndrome, thankfully. It's similar, but at that point, that's when everybody is on the same page and trying to defeat Gamera, and that's when the movie becomes really entertaining again. But yeah, this movie's not paced very well, in my opinion. And this leads me into con number 7. The rest of the human cast, aside from the elephant in the room, and aside from Dr. Hidaka, are terrible. Toshio's parents are assholes. Specifically, his dad. His dad is a dick. His sister is just a boring, bland bitch. Aoyagi is the typical reporter who's trying so desperately to emulate Sakai from Mothra vs. Godzilla. And what's her name? Yuki? Oh, Kyoko, excuse me. Kyoko is just the typical Japanese giant monster, cute girl love interest. Once again, another similarity. They're trying to emulate the trio of main characters that was synonymous with the Ishiro Honda films, which were still going on at the time. They're very typical, very bland, very paper thin, and extremely generic. But the ultimate final elephant in the room, the biggest problem with this movie, and is the biggest reason why I don't see myself returning to this movie as much. I want to like it so much more, but this little bastard that is named Toshio brings this movie down to crumbs. Fuck me. This kid sucks ass.
Indeed.
Okay, so this franchise is going to have a lot of kids, especially in the first 8 movies. Thankfully, not in the next movie. But these are some big words. I think Toshio is the single worst kid character of the entire Gamera franchise. Notice I said single. We'll get to that later in the franchise. But Toshio is terrible. I hate this kid. He's annoying, bratty, snobby, and is a complete idiot and an asshole.
Selfish, too.
And selfish. There's a couple points where he tries to sabotage federal government plans to combat against a giant monster that is threatening the being of thousands of people. And this selfish little shithead wants to sabotage these plans just so that he can see him. For some reason, him feeling loyal to Gamera because he saved him, which, based on Gamera's character in this movie, had to have been a fluke. Straight up.
Yep.
Because statistically speaking, at least a third to a quarter of the people killed in Gamera's raid on Tokyo had to have been kids. There's no way you can get around that. Gamera had to have killed kids in his attack on Tokyo.
Yeah, or at least made them orphans.
That too. So why does Toshio feel so special? I hate this kid. I hate this kid with a burning passion. Hellhound, anything to add?
Oh, wow, yeah, so you pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. What can I say that you haven't already said? So as a rule, kid characters in movies, especially horror movies, really get on my nerves when they, have no reason to be there in the first place. There are a few exceptions. I like Danielle Harris and Halloween 4 and 5. I like Alex Vincent in the first Child's Play. And I remember several decades
Child's Play
ago,
2.
like a really long...
Child's Play 2. Not the first Child's Play. He's terrible in the first Child's Play.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. He was definitely more tolerable in the second film. But anyway, there are a few exceptions. But I remember a long time ago, I was having a conversation with somebody like decades ago, and we were talking about kid characters in Japanese giant monster movies, which there are many. There are a whole lot. And we're talking about the worst ones. I remember, oddly enough, telling somebody, I said, Toshio in the original Gamera isn't like one of the worst ones. He's not that bad. Okay, well, upon rewatching this movie in recent years, I fucking hate this kid. Oh my god, is he annoying? I just cannot stand him. He's just completely insufferable, and he puts people's lives in danger. Okay, yeah, I get it. You know, he has attachment to Gamera since for some reason he has this weird obsession with turtles, and he gets rid of his pet turtle at the beginning, and then I guess he thinks that Gamera is in fact that same turtle, which is kind of stupid,
ridiculous.
Whatever, he's a kid, I guess, but yeah, it's still really stupid, no matter how you slice it. The thing is, why did Gamera save his life? I mean, he was still the villain in this movie. He wasn't the friend to hold shoulder yet, so I don't know, series foreshadowing, I guess, did that scene lead to him becoming that later sequels, or
maybe?
or
I don't know. They never even explain it in the rest of the series.
No, it makes no sense. It just sticks out like a sore thumb, and I hate it because that kid really does drag this movie down. He's easily the worst part. Yeah, like you said, the rest of the cast is, aside from like a 2 or 3, that aren't very memorable in the first place. Toshio's family pretty much sucks, but man, they're nothing compared to him. He is just awful. One of my least favorite characters ever. And, the Japanese giant monster movies around this time, a lot of them had really annoying kid characters. And, it's pretty bad when this one's definitely one of the worst. And, like you said, probably the worst single lone kid in a Gamera movie, for sure. Oh my god, I just can't stand him. I know that they wouldn't have been ballsy enough to do that back then, but I really wish the Gamera would have just stepped on him or something.
Me too.
Or I wish the kid would have liked him so much that he was stuck into the rocket ship at the end and said, "I'm going with Gamera." It's like, okay, sounds good to me.
Bye.
Yeah, see ya. Oh man, yeah, he tries to sabotage their plans to stop this giant monster that's destroying the city and obviously killing several kids in the process too. And yeah, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He says, "Oh, Gamera's just lonely. If we try to be friends with him, shut the hell up. Get the hell out of here.
Sit in your angry masturbation corner and shut the fuck up."
Yes, exactly. Yeah, can't stand that.
Toshio's terrible. He's annoying. He's bratty. He's idiotic. He's an asshole. He makes no sense. And yeah, he's the biggest problem with this movie. If you were to cut Toshio out, I would like this movie a lot more.
Me too. Definitely. He really drags it down and takes quite a few points away from me.
So, with all that being said, that's really all I have to say about the original Gamera movie. You want to give your final thoughts?
Just to sum up, it is a good movie. I'd say it is very, very likely the best Godzilla ripoff, and the similarities are definitely there and very noticeable, but they're not way too on the nose. At least not comparison to other Godzilla ripoffs. And the Toshio character does really ruin it. I really wish he wasn't in the film because it's quite a big detraction. But yeah, it's a very fun giant monster movie, and I'd say it's slowly become one of my favorites. Not that I'm going to revisit it a whole lot, mostly because of Toshio, like we said. Off to a pretty good start, I'd say.
My final thoughts on the original Gamera. It's no longer one of my favorite giant monster movies, but I probably would put it on a runner-up list. It's very competent. It's very well made. It's very entertaining. And when it's trying to not be a Godzilla ripoff and be its own thing, it's a lot more interesting and a lot more engaging. But as a Godzilla ripoff, this isn't terrible. It's noticeable. But in the end, I think the movie is original enough that if you don't necessarily overlook the fact that it's a Godzilla ripoff, but just keep that in your mind, but focus on the original ideas the movie conveys. It's a fun monster movie, and it's a good start to a decent franchise. It's good, but not great, which is why I will be giving this movie a 7 out of 10. Good. Nothing too special, not great, but if you're in the mood for a classic 60s giant monster movie, while Gamera does come up a little short, literally and figuratively, you could do a lot worse. So I do recommend you check out the original Gamera.
Yeah, I'd give it a Minnesota out of 10 as well. And like you said, you could definitely do worse.
Mm-hmm. So look forward to the next episode of Super Kaiju Binge. Go check out Lord Hellhound's channel. He's been doing a lot of horror movie reviews lately. Can we just all unanimously agree September, October, November are just the spooky months of the year?
Definitely.
Cool. Go check out his channel. Look forward to future episodes. And as always, if you're somehow, for some reason, saved by a giant turtle that destroys your house, which, oh yeah, wouldn't he be mad at Gamera for destroying his house?
Yeah.
Don't try to meet him. Just let the military do what they're trying to do to get rid of him. Don't be a selfish shithead. And I will see you guys in the next video.